Okay, today I'm joined by Helen Neal of HN Communications, an award-winning sustainability communications agency and certified B Corp. Welcome to the podcast, Helen.
Thank you, Gareth. Thanks very much for having me.
I like to start at the beginning to get to know my guests. So perhaps you could tell us how you first got involved in communications and in particular sustainability communications.
Yeah, no problem at all. I kind of fell into the kind of communications world. It was never something I initially set out to do. So my background actually is in government relations. So I worked in the UK Parliament for several years after I graduated, and then I went on to work in the corporate world, but primarily doing government relations for large global corporates. So everything from negotiating sort of regulations to making kind of investment decisions and investment deals and things like that, depending on the type of organization that I work for. Obviously there was a communications element of it, but much more in the, I would say, sort of campaigns lens. How do we take an idea or a particular way of thinking and how do we change that to get to a different point? And I think that was always really my skill set. But I got more into communications as I got older. And I found myself in a comms role by accident, having had two kids quite in close succession. I went back to my corporate job and was moved into a communications role. And to be honest, I wasn't overly happy about it at the time. Having spent a good 15, 16 years in government relations, that was my thing. And I felt a little bit as though I didn't have much control over my career trajectory. So I found transitioning into that space was not necessarily my choice. That being said, I learned a lot. I ended up leaving that particular corporate not long after I started doing the job, but I'd learnt enough to realise there was a lot of transferable skills from what I had been doing, and actually I really enjoyed it. So that's kind of how I got to the kind of communication side of things.
Yeah. And then why did you pick up on sustainability communications in particular?
So sustainability has been one of those things that has kind of followed me with all the jobs that I've ended up doing. So I worked for Virgin Atlantic for a long time doing their government relations. And naturally, with airlines, there's always a big focus and lens around, and rightly so, on carbon. I then moved to Nissan and worked on basically my role was to introduce the electric car into Europe. So Nissan produced one of the first electric cars. And at the time we were doing this back in sort of 2010, there were no regulations to allow these vehicles even on the road. And so, obviously we've come a long way from that. But again, I've always had an interest in this kind of innovation and challenge, I guess, to make the world a better place, and I think many of us, we want that, right? And I think sustainability for me was a great angle to focus on in terms of making positive improvements for the world. So I've just sort of built it up from there on in. And then we just got asked to do more and more work in that space. And it was probably about 4 years ago as a business, we decided to really niche into that kind of corporate communications, purpose and sustainability space. And I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's great. So it's sort of you're moving into, you liked it, so you jettisoned the rest.
Yeah.
Decided this was the way you wanted to move forward.
Yeah, and we're small, we're a small global business. We're around about 10, sometimes we flex up to 20. We have no interest in trying to compete with the big guys of this world, and we're certainly not going to pretend that that's who we are either. And I do think it's important when you are a smaller player that you become specialized and you become niche because that gives you a power as well as that agility as well. So I feel it's worked well for us, but of course it's always a bit of a gamble, isn't it, to as a small business turn around and say no, we're not going to work for you because that's not what we do. It can be quite hard, but I think the trade-off, the benefits, I think definitely pay off.
Well, I was going to come on to that. I was going to ask, are there potential clients you wouldn't work with, and how do you draw the line?
Yeah, there's definitely clients that we wouldn't work with. And we're a B Corp, as you mentioned at the start. So that by default gives us a parameter in terms of the kind of businesses that we've committed to work with and the businesses that we wouldn't. And for us, primarily, it would be around direct fossil fuel companies. It would be around sort of, I guess, tobacco, gambling, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But to be honest, they kind of fit with my, I guess, my moral compass anyway, that I would not feel comfortable working in those particular places. But I am not evangelical when it comes to sustainability. I'm absolutely a pragmatist, and I love business, and I see profit as a positive, and profit allows you to be able to then reinvest and do good things. So I do see it much more as I think sustainability can be viewed sometimes as a bit of a religion, and I think I definitely sit more in the camp of we need to bring everyone with us, and we need practical solutions, and it's progress over perfection. Otherwise, we're not going to move forward. So I think I definitely sit in that kind of camp as well.
Yeah, I'm always interested in it because I've worked with the defense industry, which is probably the most controversial industry I've worked with. I tend to work more with health, which perhaps that's the other side of that coin, fixing people rather than hurting people. But the PR in particular, some of it gets a little bit murky. And I went down a rabbit hole as a result of another podcast that's going out tomorrow, and found that there was recent net zero awards, and Grace.org reckon that 9 out of the 15 winners in those awards also worked for fossil fuel companies, which I suppose is a bit like an arms company selling guns to both sides in a conflict. So is there a feel in the marketing industry of ethical lines on some of these things?
I would say, we work a lot with the NGO community as well. And so I think I don't often see ourselves as quite so akin with the marketing world. And I think we work a lot more with corporates and NGOs. That being said, we do work in that marketing space. We understand it, and I am involved in it. But I do reflect on things like we go to Cannes Lions, for example, which is, as you know, the big global hub for marketing and advertising each year. And it always strikes me, I go because I learn a lot. But it does strike me that the industry as a whole, I think, is a little behind in terms of its thinking when I compare it to other industries. And I think, we often see a lot of these big PR agencies having exactly what you've just described. So on the one hand, professing something around sustainability in a positive light, but on the other, taking money from particular types of industries. What they choose to do and who they choose to work with is absolutely their choice. And I feel like any business and any large marketing firm should, live and die by that and actually own that. But where I have a problem is where you're trying to promote yourself as something that you are clearly not. And it is far better to be honest and say, look, we're interested and we want to do these good things in sustainability, and we've done this and this with these clients. But yes, we recognize the fact that we're also working with these clients as well, and be honest about it. I think what frustrates people and consumers in general is when businesses and organizations are not transparent or appear duplicitous, and then that just loses all trust. So I think that the industry needs to do more. Most industries do. We all recognize that. But I think for marketing, it's a natural industry that has always wanted to put things in the best light. It's marketing, right? They want to sell products, and to do that, you need to put it in the most positive light and all of that good stuff. And that's fine. But you can't apply those same principles when you're communicating about sustainability. And I think that's where there is a transition that needs to be made within the marketing industry right now.
And the phrase I've learned today is predatory delay, which is where and where people are deliberately trying to slow down. In the case I'm thinking of, the low carbon transition, and there's a lot of businesses make money out of that, which I I like to think that some of these weird stories that turn up about heat pumps or electric vehicles in tabloid newspapers are, the paper scratching around, but there's actually people making money behind that, feeding some of this, if not full on misinformation, then misleading information in. So
Yeah.
I know I'm asking a lot of you, saying as you're on the white hat side rather than the black hat, but do you ever see a sort of rebellion against that sort of manipulating the public story away from something which is a moral and real priority to deal with?
Do I ever see that? I think so. We've done, obviously, as I mentioned, we did a lot within EVs,
Yeah.
and we've done a lot since around in the space around hydrogen, which is also a little bit controversial in some ways. We have looked at heat pumps as well versus hydrogen heating, and I think I think what I notice is both sides feel adamant that their solution is the right one and must dominate. And I think what I reflect is that we are living in a very messy world where we're going through one of the biggest transitions in humanity. Let's be honest, this digital revolution, this AI revolution. And I think things are messy. And I don't think now things were simpler 30 years ago, but there's not really a one size fits all solution for a lot of these things anymore. And I think there are different sides genuinely thinking that they mean well most of the time, and they believe that they have their solution. I think where the problem arises is where they think in absolutes, and actually that we all know that I think the road to net zero is not going to be done through absolutes. It's going to be done through a massive range of solutions, and some will work
Yeah.
into the long term, and some won't. But we don't know which ones they're going to be yet.
Yeah. I was thinking more of the people who are actually trying to just slow on behalf of the status quo. But anyway, I appreciate I am sort of grinding my own axe here because you're here to talk to about it to get your perspective. But going back to what you do, what would you say? Is there a secret sauce of sustainability communications? What do you find works and what do you find doesn't?
I think there is a secret. I think there is a really good combination of things that are very simple, that will be very obvious when you hear them, but quite surprising that in a lot of practical applications, we don't see it getting done. So I think the first thing is that any business and organization, you need to have a board and a CEO that actually is on board and believes in it. If you're working in that environment, if you're an agency or if you're working in-house doing communications for a business where you do not have that board and CEO support, you are going to be continuously pushing against a brick wall. So because of the type of things that are required around sustainability and such huge change, you do need that board support and board support beyond just ticking a box and KPIs, by the way. So where I see that it truly work is when businesses that we've worked with have actually embedded financial KPIs to their board members. So not just the CSO who's responsible for sustainability, but actually making all of the board responsible for sustainability, and each one of them having their bonuses linked to sustainable objectives. That really does focus the mind, and I do see that accelerated change tends to happen within those types of businesses. Mm-hmm. From a comms perspective, I think it is very much about communicating not as a mechanism to try and sell or get consumers to buy your product because you're selling a concept around sustainability. It's also not when you're trying to pick out a concept around sustainability and link it to your product where there's no real linkage or authenticity towards it. So it's about having your brand properly mapped to what the sustainability concept is about. A quick example being there's a beer brand in Romania which has a bison on the front of it. And we did some work around that where it's endangered. And the kind of whole concept around the sustainability work that they were doing was to maintain the habitat of the bison within Romania. It was a really simple message, a simple story, but it was deeply connected to the brand and what it stood for and what it was about. And consumers could very clearly recognize it and understand it. That's a great way of communicating sustainability as a brand and as a business. Where it goes the other way is where you're perhaps using some of those traditional tools to communicate about your product or service in that kind of traditional marketing way to sell, and using, sustainability topics within that framework of communication. What we say, and to be honest, we've learned this a lot from the NGOs that we work with, is to actually communicate your sustainability with an intent to educate and to share freely that knowledge and learning, and to not be afraid to share the positive and the difficulty, and to talk about your sustainability when you have done something, rather than talk about what you're going to do all the time, and being very specific, and ensure that when you are talking about it and any claims that you are making, all of those claims can be clearly tracked, ideally on your website afterwards, so that you're leaving no vaguity and that all of that information has been third-party verified. And I know it sounds a lot, but actually it is worth doing that, and the impact of not doing that properly, and I've seen time and time again businesses who haven't, things unravel, and actually the brand reputation is massive.
Yeah, there's a huge amount there to unpick. Starting off with the bison, I love that example.
Yeah.
I do some work on internal engagement, and I talk about green jiu-jitsu, which is instead of throwing internal green messages at people, you work with the culture in the organization. So in healthcare, we talk about the health benefits of active travel or the health risks of climate change. In engineering, we talk about technical solutions and all that kind of thing. But the bison sort of nice is a sort of external communications equivalent, is taking what the absolute emblem of the company and doing a sustainability project based on that. So I find that particularly interesting.
They call it brand mapping.
Yeah.
Just doing a whole rigorous process for each brand, really understanding what it's about, and then looking at what could be in it. Sometimes it's one thing. Sometimes they make a decision to say, we're not going to do anything with this brand on sustainability. It's just not going to work. It just depends. But it must fit with what the brand stands for and what it's about. I think the bison is quite an easy one because you can visualize it and you can understand it. But yeah, you can also do it very badly wrong, as I'm sure you know, and it's often where it's not had the rigor of thought and connection with actually what the brand stands for and then why you're doing the sustainability action. And sometimes it's okay to say, no, this isn't right for this brand. We need to think about it in a different way.
Yeah, and what you say about the backing up anything. You remind me of one of my old clients now retired. He always said, "We never claim anything we cannot prove," which I think is absolutely true. That, I suppose, takes us into the deadly world of greenwash a little bit, of people who get that wrong. And I suppose, obviously we talked about claims and proof, but when you're working with these clients, how do you draw a line that you say, no, that's greenwash? You're pushing this too far. Is that a difficult conversation ever?
It hasn't been. I think it's one of the reasons why businesses will hire us, is to help them navigate those potential pitfalls. In fact, we wouldn't be doing our job properly if we weren't there holding their hand. And actually, there's one thing to tell them not to do it, but there's quite another to be able to show them why. And I think what we try to do is work with them so that they understand why this is also the case as well. And the whole greenwashing piece is extremely difficult. It's highly nuanced. Often within businesses, these are people who are perhaps haven't worked in this space before, don't necessarily have the skill set. And I genuinely believe that most businesses and most people want to do the right thing. I think greenwashing mostly happens. Let's put some of the bad guys to side because there's always the bad guys, but I feel there's a big grey area in the middle of businesses who are really worried about getting caught up in greenwashing and feeling too afraid to actually talk about it at all. But I think with some simple frameworks around making sure that things are verified, only communicating when you have something that you can back up, making sure that you're collaborating, not just doing this on your own, but working alongside third-party organizations. Partnerships with NGOs are a great way in order to do that, to give validity and also surety that you are on the right path, doing the right thing. So I think it is something that they are genuinely worried about. I feel it's a shame that we've got to a point where they're so worried that they're holding back on saying anything, because I do believe that the more businesses communicate on this, the more opportunities there are for collaboration and collective action. And that is the only way we're going to find solutions that are going to support the journey to net zero. So I'm a big believer in we have to keep talking. We have to share the difficulty. We have to share the learnings. If we don't do that, we're not going to move forward as quickly. So we need to help businesses start to feel more confident that they have a clear framework to communicate on sustainability in a way that is not going to harm their brand.
One of my frustrations with the concept of greenwashing is some people call greenwashing things that I think are good practice. For some people, a sustainability project that brings in profit for the company is greenwashing. And my view is, well, why? Why shouldn't it be win-win? And even, the story behind the coining of the phrase was those little signs in hotel bathrooms that say, if you want a fresh towel, then throw it on the floor if you're happy with the one you've got hanging up. But yeah. I think, for somebody who's struggled at times with getting the users of a system to behave the way you want them to, to me, that's actually a very neat example of user engagement. And I do find the phrase greenwash gets bandied about, sometimes correctly and sometimes incorrectly as well. So you talk about the claims and the NGOs, but are there any other, things that you advise your clients not to go near because even if it's a worthwhile project, the wider world, particularly sort of the activist world, might jump on it and say, haha, that's greenwash?
I mean, I think inevitably there are areas for businesses where there are riskier areas to get involved with than others. But I think, if you look at food producers and palm oil, for example, again, controversial topic. I mentioned earlier, hydrogen, potentially a controversial topic. And there are pros and cons to each one of those. And I think it's really important because no business is perfect. And there will inevitably be areas that are not so ideal compared to where they want to be. And that's normal. And that's part of the journey that businesses are going on. This is when it comes back to having a very clear plan and roadmap and commitment to sustainability. And so we always say it's really important for the leadership and everybody who is talking about sustainability in the organization to say, we have a plan. We're not there yet. We don't have all the answers. We're trying. We're not always getting it right, but we're trying to make progress. And these are the areas where we're making progress. And these are the areas that we're learning. Yeah. And the moment that you start to have an honest, open conversation about yourself as a business, you start to then take back power and ownership for the good and the less good. Yeah. And as long as you have that overarching plan and you are sticking to it and you can show that you are making progress against it, I say to them that is your North Star, and that is the kind of basis to kind of help you move forward, because every business is probably going to come up against something tricky or challenging when it comes to sustainability. And that's why I said at the start, for me, I am not evangelical about sustainability. I'm not religious about it in any way, but I am very practical and I want to see action happen. But I want to do so in a way that is sensible and looks at kind of the reality of where we are today and how do we move forward. So that whole kind of progress over perfection piece is a big mantra of mine. So we tend to primarily work with NGOs that share that much more pragmatic point of view of working alongside corporates to help them get from where they are today to a little bit further forward in the future.
Yeah, the word I'm pulling out of what of that answer is honesty. I suppose that breeds sort of authenticity and trust with most of the audience. I suppose to a certain extent, sometimes you just got to put on a tin hat because you can't please all the people all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why that strategy and that commitment of your journey towards net zero is so deeply important, and that you are aligning your bonuses to it, that you are tracking it, and that you can show how you're working towards it. And there is inevitably bumps in the road. You're not going to know all of the solutions right now, but you're working towards getting there. And I think that strategy and that plan is your North Star that you revert back to in the good times and the bad to help you keep moving forward.
Excellent, thanks. The next question I had on my prepared list was, what's your favorite case study? And it might be your buffaloes, but I suppose if you could talk us through another case study of how you've worked with a client and how that story has developed, and I suppose what they're doing differently as a result of working with you compared to what they were doing before.
Yeah, I think a nice story that I can share is, and we don't talk about this as a value enough, but I think you touched on it when we were talking earlier, long-term clients. And I feel that says so much more sometimes than, the short-term projects and things that you end up doing. But long-term clients, people that have worked and you've worked with for 4, 5, 6 years, I think those are some of the success stories that you can really see change over a period of time. Yes, those kind of short, sharp campaigns, you can see an outcome, and that's great and it's quite exciting. But for me, and particularly with sustainability, sometimes it is about that long-term growth in raising awareness and building credibility, and seeing that build over time is something that I really love. That gives me a great joy. So we've worked with a Japanese food and beverage manufacturer, beer manufacturer, for around 5 years now. And on the start of their journey, they really didn't communicate very much at all about sustainability. They were at the very start. And actually, that was a lovely point for us to be able to come in, because we could be on that journey together with them. And so helping them to establish that North Star strategy that I talked about was one of the first steps. But from that, that's given us a great basis to then build awareness and credibility over time. And the credibility piece is something I'm very interested in, because, as you know, that's not something that you can do overnight. And I think that credibility has come from the type of communication that over time they felt more and more confident to put out. So, like I was telling you earlier, using those principles of honesty, humility, recognizing that we're not there yet, but we have a plan, because they have a plan, and that they're working towards it, and being able to showcase that action on the way and building that up over time, and also recognizing that strategically they need partnerships. So I think one of the other things is around then building the partnership layer on top of the initial strategy and working with partners globally to help them accelerate that journey. And then finally, through great communication, building great partnerships, showing progress, they have over time built up quite significant credibility, to the point now where they are asked to speak at the UN, they're asked to speak at major events like Climate Week in New York. And really, people listen to what they have to say, because they have shown a tried and trusted method over those 5 years of incremental progress. And it's not necessarily sexy and exciting marketing. It's consistent progress with humility and honesty and proof and partnership, and just continuously building on that I think I highlight it because it is, I feel it's often undervalued, but actually the result you get from it is extremely valuable.
Yeah. And I assume there's a whole trust building element between you and the client in order to get that
Very
shift.
much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And that's why, and I'm sure you know this too, that actually being with that organization for such a long time is part of that trust building to a point now where, we're in a position where there is that trust there that we can continue to, walk with them on the journey. It was one of the reasons, by the way, that we became B Corp,
Yeah.
because I recognized, and this particular client inspired me because I could see the challenges around reporting and the being very aware of all of these kind of factors in terms of how you run your business. And this is a multinational company. We're very small, but I wanted to go through a process of rigor that challenged us in a similar way, so that we could walk in their shoes a little bit to understand the challenges and the pain points. And I'm very glad I did.
Yeah.
And I think, has it brought us new business? Probably not. But what it has done is it has helped us understand our sector better, and the people that work in the team love being part of something that has a set of rigor around its approach. And I feel like we can hardly help clients communicate on sustainability if we're not holding ourselves to account as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, almost every one of these questions, your answer takes me on to the next question, and you've answered most of the next one, but because I was going to ask,
Sorry.
as a small, 12 to 20 person business, is
Yeah.
B Corp worth it? But I have had other people express a little bit of frustration at the amount of green tape that involves of getting all your
Oh
data
yeah.
together and providing all those different things. But
Yeah.
but apart from the experience of going through it itself, does it make you a better business?
Hmm. I wonder whether we would do this anyway, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, I'm not 100% sure whether it makes us a better business. I think what it does is it maybe gives us a rubber stamp to say, yes, we are doing the right thing within a framework, and that we're committed to it. I think that's what it says. But I think there was a big kind of focus around B Corps, wasn't there, a couple of years ago? Then it's come under a level of controversy. I'm actually the co-chair of the local Be Local in my area in Northamptonshire. And I really do see that there are huge positives in it, and it's a great mechanism to further educate and communicate sustainability to businesses who aren't aware of it and what the processes are. I think one of the best benefits I've had from it is it prepared the business in such a way for future reporting. And so whilst a business of my size doesn't have to do things like CSRD and these regulations that will be coming in, the fact that we are working with large global clients, we are a supplier, and I firmly believe that as time is going on, requirements from their procurement and looking at their scope 3 supply chains, we are inevitably going to get asked for more and more. So I see it also as a bit of a long-term future proofing as well. So it's not for everybody. And there are plenty of other good schemes out there, like the Better Business Act, for example. That's a movement that's happening across the UK. So there are other schemes, and I would say to other businesses, have a look to see what scheme is the right fit for you and your business in terms of where you're at right now. And maybe one might lead into the other, but I think it's not the be all and end all, shall we say, if you forgive the pun.
But it's does it get recognized? Because particularly from a communications point of view, it doesn't really pass the Ronseal test. When I first came across B Corp, I thought, what's that? Not, oh, there's a new sustainability badge in town.
Yeah.
So do the people, your either clients or other contacts of yours, does it get recognition, do you feel?
I feel it does but then I am working in a very specific sphere.
Yeah.
So I think it does because of the community and the industries that I'm working with, and particularly on the NGO side, because obviously around about 50% of our work is with NGO as well. It does get recognized, and some people will comment on it. Is it a reason why they choose us as a business over another? Again, I'm not so sure. But is it something that perhaps builds a level of underlying confidence or alignment with their values, perhaps in terms of what they know about B Corp? Yes, probably it does. Um, but I think it's a lot of work to go through the process, as you touched on earlier. And so I wouldn't advise doing it for just those reasons because there's so much work to do. You have to be very committed to it beyond thinking that it's going to perhaps give you an uplift in terms of your business, because I'm not sure that that's what it will do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah. I'm just interested because obviously, I suppose almost the base layer of sustainability communications is having accreditations. So you've got that third party stamp.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why I thought I'd delve into it. Plus a bit of nosiness because I like to know what a B Corp is.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you do it?
I'd say, well, I have just me, so I have enough bureaucracy to do with that.
Fine, fair enough. Yeah.
Yes, I think as a solo consultant, I think I may dodge that one for the time being.
Mind you, I know a few solo consultants that have done it,
Yes.
admittedly in the sustainability space, but they are solopreneurs and they've
Yeah.
done it.
I've had one on the podcast.
Okay.
Paula Owens. I don't know if you know Paula. She's a gamification expert. She was doing gamification before people were talking about gamification of
Ah,
sustainability.
okay.
So if anybody's interested, it was probably this time last year it went up on the podcast. Quite one of my early ones. But anyway, enough of me advertising. I've kept you for quite some time, and I really appreciate the insights you've given. I suppose. If you had one parting thought that you'd want to leave with the audience on sustainability communications, what would that be?
Mine would be really don't be afraid to communicate on sustainability, but do so in a way that you can feel confident that you have built in a level of rigor and accountability to how you're communicating on it. Or I think, as you touched upon beautifully earlier, maintain that honesty. And, there's no requirement for you to make it more than what it is. We're on a journey. And so just communicate with honesty, humility, make sure things are verified if you're making claims and that they can be backed up. But take control of it and communicate on it because it's the right thing to do. Consumers want to see businesses make solutions around this space. They want to see that businesses are doing the right thing and they will thank you for it, but just do so in a way that is responsible and honest.
Excellent, thanks. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, HN Communications website, is that the best?
Yeah, take a look on the HN Comms website, and also on there, if it helps, we do have a little quiz. It takes less than a minute, but you can just put in some your own feedback in terms of how you're doing on sustainability communications, and it will give you a score based on what you respond. And it will also give you some tailored tips as to what you could do right now in order to improve. It's a bit of fun, but it's also hopefully a little bit of value for people just to help them get thinking on their journey.
Excellent. I'll have to give it a go.
Do.
But yes, thank you very much, Helen, for joining us. I really did enjoy our conversation today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gareth.